Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island from 1998. This was a huge comeback for the Scooby-Doo franchise as it kind of took a break, sort of, after Pup Named Scooby-Doo, although I think there's like a direct-to-VHS thing between that. But effectively, like, this is the first coming out big Scooby-Doo project in a while that anyone cared about for most of the 90s until this. After Scooby-Doo sort of came back because of reruns on Cartoon Network, they wanted to do something different with Scooby-Doo and kind of bring the brand back. And also because Disney was making a lot of money off those like direct to VHS movies, and Warner's wanted in on that too. And because they did do that with Batman and that worked out for Batman, so they wanted to make a kind of what would have been much like Mask of the Phantasm, I guess. So every Warner's brand that has its best movie ends up on VHS at the time. Make a real movie, which there hadn't been. I know there'd been like Ghoul School and there'd been like Scooby-Doo movies, kind of TV things, but there'd never something been done at this level before, just not in theaters till later, I guess. And this is kind of a meta sort of commentary on Scooby-Doo. It's not really the first time there had been actual monsters in the franchise. I know sometimes that's said. 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo already happened at a Vincent Price in it. There was Ghoul School. There's like a ton of other different examples that I've heard people list and I've seen myself. The difference is the whole marketing of this movie and really the plot is that they are so used to these ghosts being fake that they cannot imagine what would happen if they actually had to deal with zombies instead of, real estate scams, basically. Well, I guess this is sort of a real estate scam, but with ghosts, so it's fine. It still involves real estate. Scooby-Doo's always, but it does involve real estate. And it was kind of a bold idea. It's also interesting because this both, makes the franchise look older because you're actually dealing with zombies. You're appealing to an older audience, but the Scooby-Doo characters are still Scooby-Doo characters like Daphne, Fred, Velma, Shaggy, and Scooby all act the same. It might be, a much more, grown-up, mature world, but they're still those characters. It's interesting to age up a franchise while also still being that franchise. It feels like a lot of them have to be like all the other ones. They have to like think of like what would it be like, and like I think it's like sort of the two. This movie reminds me of the famous like cutting between the two, like what's the appeal of Scooby-Doo, and Sarah Michelle Gellar's going on about like it was a girl show, it was a boy show, it was the mystery, it was all these things. And I don't think she's wrong, but then you cut to Freddie Prinze Jr. is like, because it was a talking dog, come on. And that's like the real appeal of Scooby-Doo. It does have all those things. It does appeal to all these people. It has fun mysteries. It has a bunch of good gags. But like my son's 4, and probably why I'm reviewing this because I'm watching so much Scooby-Doo presently, and I have these Scooby-Doo cards, of course. Shout out to the Discord. I think it is both. And I think this movie gets that Scooby-Doo is both those things, and also will like never die ever, and will outlive us all, and will be probably Western civilization's greatest artistic accomplishment of all time. Is probably where I think the world is going. But regardless, I think Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island has a lot of fun with it, and also like really plays up, which none of the other ones did, the idea that they are not able to handle ghosts. It's sort of like what Harvey Birdman did and Space Ghost did, but instead of like those are entirely ironic and a lot sillier and sort of making fun of the things, this is respectful but also understanding how to add an element to the franchise which majorly critiques what the franchise had been doing up until that point. I mean, for the most part, we're just forgetting those other examples, but you know what I mean. The Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island is about Scooby and the gang have been apart for, I keep reading a year, but it feels like longer based on the movie, but they've been broken up. Daphne has become a TV host who finds spooky stuff, but she's sick of finding actual just like people pretending to be ghosts, or the world in the Scooby-Doo and stuff. Fred helps her and is her cameraman. Velma is running a mystery bookshop. Shaggy and Scooby are doing, I don't know, they're being Shaggy. Weren't they helping with the airport stuff? Doesn't matter. They're fine. Anyway, they haven't been together in a while, and so they decide to like get back together as Daphne's trying to find real ghosts and stuff. They do. You see a montage of them doing regular Mystery Incorporated stuff, where they go to various like places and like keep finding that these monsters aren't the real people and stuff. And then they wind up on Moonscar Island because they hear about local legends and stuff like that while they're in New Orleans. And then eventually find out that there are real zombies on this island. And what are they going to do now that they can't just pull the mask off someone in the famous scene where they're trying to and they realize what they're dealing with is an actual zombie. One thing I do find interesting, and I've been to New Orleans a few times, I've not been to Avery Island, which is where Tabasco comes from, but is this supposed to be that? Because the hot peppers on this island are very much a thing in the movie, and it does take place in New Orleans. I know there are other islands and stuff in New Orleans and stuff in Louisiana, but like I was like, is this supposed to be Avery Island? I've watched so many things and read so many things, and no one's brought that up, but like, I'm not trying to act like I have this insider info. I've not been to Avery Island or any island in New Orleans, but I don't think so. But I was just like, is this Avery Island? This is Avery Island, right? I just think, okay. Anyway, I'm like pretty sure. I don't know. If you're from New Orleans, let me know where you think Moonscar Island is. This is actually, I think, late 90s Scooby-Doo has one of my favorites, which is the Scooby-Doo Project. But I think this and that understands something that Scooby-Doo has been lacking, and also sort of bringing up certain elements of Scooby-Doo and sort of both updating them and pushing the franchise forward, both in like modern context, what Scooby-Doo Project does, and Scooby-Doo and Zombie Island does it in terms of like critiquing the franchise in total. It is very repetitive. Hanna-Barbera stuff was extremely repetitive. They were the assembly line of assembly line animation. There's certain glory to that. There's a mystique about that. There's an art to that. But Scooby-Doo and all the rip-off Scooby-Doos basically did the same crap all the time. And this is like, well, we can't just do that again. We have to add a different element, because otherwise, who cares other than kids who will watch Scooby-Doo reruns for all time forever. But that doesn't matter. And I understand why people like this one so much. I do actually like it a lot. I like how it was set up really well, because the whole movie, you're very much aware that, I mean, it's like done, it's overbearing a bit, but they're like, the zombies aren't gonna be zombies, and this isn't real, and there's no real like spooky stuff. And then it just straight up becomes a horror movie, which Scooby-Doo, the setup is horror movie stuff. It is spooky stuff. You know, Scooby and Shaggy run away because they're scared, and I think like having them actually deal with that is actually really interesting and a really smart way to reintroduce it. I also think it's because the animation is really good. It's kind of surprising how good the animation is, particularly at the time. I've heard people say it's straight up like almost like anime level and stuff, and I agree. It is, a lot more movement than you're typically used to, especially if they're watching Scooby-Doo reruns. If you watch the Scooby-Doo show or Scooby-Doo Where Are You, that animation, the movement, I mean, some of the drawings and the backgrounds are great, but the movement's like really not great at all, particularly by modern standings or 90s standards. It was pretty bad. And so like updating to such a screen really makes this pop. It does sort of feel like this is a big event for the Scooby franchise. And I think that also helps updating everything, because it makes it feel like when things happen, like, oh, not only are you artistically and animation wise and like you made this big deal and you're bringing it back after all these years, you actually have something to say with it. Makes it mean a lot more. How many times like over the years have we had franchises come back and you're like, oh, another one, oh cool, Michael Myers, yeah, okay, I guess this is better than that other second one, but I don't, and this like is now everyone's favorite thing. Like this is like if Force Awakens was like a really good, was like your favorite Star Wars movie. This is nobody's favorite Star Wars movie. It's like that. I think it's like kind of amazing. But they did have something to say with it. And I do think like putting Scooby-Doo into this, but it's also like a reflection of the '90s and what was happening with Hanna-Barbera. Daphne's show is called Coast to Coast, which I find interesting. I don't know if that was an overdoing thing, but like, okay, let's take Space Ghost and like make fun of it. It's a talk show, or Harvey Birdman or whatever. And Scooby-Doo, it's like, well, what if we do it in a serious way? What if we don't do it so ironically? And I think that's actually really fascinating. I also think the idea of like that these people are screwed over and that there's a long history to it, and they're not, just using the history to make a scam, like that there's actually evil histories to this country that aren't just real estate scams, which And that's kind of why we took out the Native Americans. But if we're being real about it, but it was I think I actually appreciate that because it was sort of like, okay, let's use that context and do something with it. It's really actually very smart. And this did inspire countless Scooby-Doo direct-to-video movies. I know the director of this, Jim Stenstrom, did the first 4. I'm a little curious to revisit those. I'm not sure if I'm going to let my son watch this one because it's a little scary. I didn't find it scary, but I have a bad things that are scary to kids meter, so I should not be the judge of that, to be honest with you. But as I've been told countless times. So I don't know. I didn't find it that scary, but I didn't see it as a kid. I do find it like to be, in terms of like 90s animation stuff, a really good step forward. I think like What's New Scooby-Doo would not have happened without a show like this, which I think is actually a really good version of Scooby-Doo. I think Mystery Incorporated in particular, that version, would not have happened without this one. But I do think like what works about like take this rather than like Scoob, for example, you kind of can't, I mean, this plays as a follow-up to whatever Scooby-Doo thing, I don't know. But you kind of can't not do Scooby-Doo. You know, you kind of can't not do Mystery Incorporated. You kind of have to do them. But you have to know what you're doing with them. And I think too many people, when they take on these things, just want to do, you know, the typical thing. And this obviously was like very purposely not doing that. But also at the same time, like you have to be respectful of it, and which sounds silly, but like I really do think like you have to have those elements. Like Scooby and Shaggy have to eat way too much food. This time Shaggy's voiced by Billy West instead of Casey Kasem because of he didn't like certain elements. He didn't want to do a Burger King commercial for Scooby and Shaggy and stuff like that, which he's a vegetarian, which I always thought they should honor, to be honest. But they had a pretty good voice cast, and Adrian Barbeau is in this, which I think is really cool. Who was also in Batman the Animated Series, interestingly enough. But I like this as an animated film, but I also like this as someone who's had to watch a lot more Scooby-Doo recently. I do find this to be one of the better Scooby-Doo films. One of the better versions of Scooby-Doo, because it was able to kind of play with the format, but not play with it in, you know, so much of the 90s is an ironic playing with thing. And to do it, but also just straight up do Scooby-Doo is actually a lot more interesting, because you're sort of like, first off, you're advertising it that way, but also you're doing it within its own thing. You're not divorcing it, making an alternative version, and also bring the animation up. It's kind of wild when you consider the Disney direct-to-video things were like not trying to do that at all. Really, it's pretty wild. I do think like updating it, although I think Pup Named Scooby-Doo tried to do that too. They tried to change things, and I really like Pup Named Scooby-Doo. But I think like this understood like, okay, if we're gonna bring it back and we really need to make a big splash, and they did. And I think like it's interesting when you look at legacy media and all these reboots, this is probably a better one to look at because it was able to advance it while also being respectful. And at the end, like everyone loves this one. It gets talked about every Halloween and everything with Scooby-Doo. And, you know, watching now, I completely agree. As someone who's had to watch What's New Scooby-Doo and Scooby-Doo Show and Scrappy-Doo and all the different versions that are on Tubi and Max and all that stuff. It's a really nice movie. I think it was one of the better versions of Scooby-Doo. And I actually, you know, if you're into Scooby, I don't know what the age range should be. I'm not sure if I'll play it for my son, but I did find it kind of much like I do with the Scooby-Doo project, where it surprises you how smart it is. And I think like that's when these things I think really sing, where you're like, oh, you're actually doing something interesting, but you still have Shaggy and Scooby eating too many peppers and having po' and like all the ridiculous stuff they're supposed to do, while also dealing with, you know, actually dealing with a zombie island with also cat creatures and all this stuff. Like they really go for it with the supernatural angle, and I kind of wish they would do more of just another straight supernatural Scooby-Doo show again, much like 13 Ghosts in this vein or something. I know they've done like other follow-ups, like this director did the next 4 after this, and they did Return to Zombie Island, but this is such an interesting way to do it, and I think like they actually work so well with the supernatural stuff. And I kind of I don't know. I like this version as much as I like the classic version. Like, I like them actually dealing with actual ghosts and seeing it in presumably like sort of the first time in this, and them not being goofy, silly, ghosts or something with in their various other versions. These are actually serious, scary villains. Kind of gives it that extra bite to it, but I think like it's nice for a franchise to come back and actually say something and advance their franchise rather than just trying to recapture something. This is trying to recapture your magic by actually saying something new with it, and it helped bring Scooby-Doo back and bring it, a forever franchise that will always be producing work. Whether that's good or not, I don't know. That is sort of this thing's legacy, but as a movie in itself, aside from that, I actually thought it was really great and an underrated, probably one of the better pieces of animation of a pretty great decade that was the 90s. So if you have seen Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.